All right, it's hour 2 here on the White House Brief Channel and iHeartRadio and stations across the nation. Thank you so much for joining us. And on the line, we've got a very, very special guest with a very tight schedule, Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. Congresswoman, thanks so much for joining us here on the White House Brief.
Always a privilege. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Well, obviously, a lot going on in Washington, but I got to start with this story. I love it. Headline in the Star Tribune, Bachmann, don't tread on my light bulbs, talking obviously about this 2007 mandate requiring that traditional incandescent light bulbs be phased out in favor of those ones that my lampshades in my apartment don't fit over. Can you tell me a little bit about what this bill's all about?
Yeah, it was an outrage back in 2007. The federal government decided it was smarter than the average American, and they were going to make illegal incandescent light bulbs and force Americans to buy the mercury-laden light bulbs called CFLs. I thought it was wrong. I think that we should be able to choose whatever light bulb we want. The EPA put out 8 pages of hazardous cleanup in case you break one of these new CFL light bulbs in your home. It's dangerous to pets and kids and vulnerable adults. So anyway, all my bill does, it's the Light Bulb Freedom of Choice Act, which basically says the federal government, get your nose out of people's business, let consumers decide whatever light bulb they want to have.
And one of the things that came out of this mandate was actually people who work at a traditional light bulb factory were fired.
They were fired, and the interesting thing is the CFL light bulbs were all manufactured in China. So Nancy Pelosi was shipping even more jobs overseas.
Unbelievable. All right, well, let's move on to a new topic here that I know you're very fervent on, repealing Obamacare. What's going to happen with this? It obviously didn't happen during this past budget cycle, this continuing resolution thing. It doesn't look like, how are we going to get this done?
Well, we do need to repeal the government takeover of health care. That's what people are begging us to do, and you're right, it'll be very difficult to do a repeal, but people are saying at least don't fund this thing, because the bill passed, but don't give it any money. What we just found out, and what your listeners need to know, we found out that Speaker Pelosi put $105 billion worth of funding. This is an incredible amount of money, by the way, because we've been fighting over trying to cut $100 billion out of the budget. We just found out that she slipped in $105 billion worth of funding that already passed. When Obamacare passed, she had $105 billion worth of funding in it, and nobody knew.
Wow.
Can you imagine members of Congress voted for a bill, and when they cast their vote, they didn't even know there was their vote meant they were voting to spend $105 billion? They did. So no Republican voted for that bill, but the liberals that voted for the bill also voted to give Obamacare $105 billion. It's done. It's already got $105 billion. This year, $5 billion of that will be spent, and $100 billion between now and 1/19. So this is the point. In the next spending bill called a continuing resolution, because the government will run out of money by March 18th, in the next spending bill, we need to draw a line in the sand, and we need to pull back this $105 billion. I mean, this is outrageous that members of Congress weren't even told that this money was in the bill.
Unreal.
This money is so big that it could run the state of Minnesota, the entire state, for over 3 years.
Wow.
That's how much money this is. So we need your listeners to contact their member of Congress and tell them, do not support any money, not 1 cent, to continue spending government money unless it includes pulling back that $105 billion that was already spent to put Obamacare into place.
So we've already got money spent. We've already got some regulations going into place, which are much harder to unravel.
6,000 pages.
Wow.
6,000 pages have already been written by Obama to put Obamacare into place. This is outrageous what these people are doing.
Unbelievable. And we're also seeing the healthcare cost curve going up.
Oh, it's spiking.
My healthcare's going up.
We were all told, we're going to say, Obama was saying we're going to save $1.3 trillion if we pass Obamacare. My eye, now the Congressional Budget Office has come out and said this is going to cost hundreds of billions. We know eventually it'll cost trillions, and we know for sure it's $105 billion that they've just sucked out of the system. Here we are straining to save maybe $100 billion, maybe, and then we find out that we've already spent $105 billion, and members of Congress didn't even know it was in the bill. It is legislative malpractice, And I think the voters have to insist that we pull that money back, because how can you pass a bill when you don't even know? It's like you're drunk and you hit the button. You don't even know that you're voting to spend $105 billion.
It's a ton of money. And you know what else is a ton of money? This report that we saw this morning from the GAO, and this is related to the healthcare discussion here. Nearly 10% of Medicare payments are going to fraudulent places. So 10% of the money that we're all paying, that's being taken out of our wallets, being taken out of our purses, being given to the federal government, is going to fraudulent or improper places. I mean, this is something that's been happening for years, and I only think it's going to get worse when you're adding more and more bureaucracy.
It will, because Medicaid is expanding at skyrocketing levels. So take that 10% of fraud, and that money is expanding at skyrocketing levels. We don't have it to lose anymore. Before, when our economy was booming, maybe you could afford to lose some money. We can't anymore. We aren't seeing job creation at this point at the level that we need to keep our economy humming. And so Medicaid is mandatory spending. In other words, it's just on automatic pilot.
Right.
And this has got to stop. And I think that people are just sick of it. They're tired of it. And the GAO report that you just referenced gives us all the ammunition we need, metaphorically speaking, to go in there and make these decisions, because these aren't tough decisions as far as I'm concerned. To cut out fraud, this is not a tough decision.
Right.
You just defund by 10%, and then the agency is going to have to figure out how to get rid of the fraud.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to have to step up enforcement. And now I just want to turn the tables, talk about the budget resolution, the one that was signed by the president yesterday, passed by the Senate, passed by the House. You voted against it in the House, against some of the Republican leadership. Can you talk about that?
I did. Very few of us, less than a half dozen of us, voted no on the continuing resolution. I did so because I just found this shocking information out about $105 billion that had already been spent on Obamacare, and the continuing resolution cut about $4 billion in spending, but it did not defund Obamacare. This is the line in the sand that people want us to fight over. They want Obamacare repealed. They recognize it can't happen with President Obama in office, but at minimum, we hold the power of the purse in the House. They want us to stand up and fight like men on this issue. And my opinion is you can't win if you don't fight.
Right.
And so we've got to put in the defunding of Obamacare. That's a non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned, and it's up to President Obama if he's going to come to terms with this. People are really upset about this Obamacare, and he's got to recognize that, and it's up to Republicans to fight. That's why we need your listeners to contact their member of Congress and insist not one penny goes to continue funding the government unless it includes defunding of Obamacare, which includes pulling back that $105 billion that was already appropriated. If we do that, we're $105 billion to the good.
Now, what's interesting here, and what a lot of my listeners are saying to me is, Paul, you know what? We're seeing, post office facing cash shortage by the end of the year. We're seeing GAO report with nearly 10% of Medicaid payments fraudulent. We're seeing just all this money being spent, or in many cases wasted, the $105 billion you've been talking about. I mean, it's angering to a lot of people that we say, we say, okay, you know what? What's going on, Speaker Boehner? What's going on with the leadership here? Are you upset with your own party's leadership here? I have to ask the question.
Well, I voted no because I disagreed with the continuing resolution. And so now I think, to be fair to the leadership, they didn't know about this $105 billion at that time. At least it doesn't appear that they did. Okay. I've been trying to let the leadership know, along with other members of Congress. So we're going to be having a meeting early next week because I will guarantee your listeners today know more than many of the members of Congress. And it's because they were misled on this bill, not by Speaker Boehner, but by Speaker Pelosi. We were misled as to what was in that bill. No one knew that there was $105 billion in spending. Remember, she famously said we have to pass the bill to know what's in it. That statement was more true than what we realized. I mean, that is malpractice. That's a lie. Yeah. That's a fraud. To not even tell members of Congress what is in the bill. We literally didn't have the ability to even read the bill, or our staffs to take a look at what was contained. $105 billion in spending
slipped in. slipped in.
It is beyond. It's beyond what anyone can think. I mean, when you consider that when Harry Truman was approving the budget for the government back in about 1950, the budget for the entire year was about $41 billion. This is $105 billion, and no one even knows they're spending it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And you know what? I have got a quick question from one of our listeners here writing to me on our Facebook fan page. How have the weekly constitutional teaching meetings going? How are those going?
They're absolutely excellent. We had Antonin Scalia come in to speak to us. We had Larry Arnn from Hillsdale College. Mark Levin, the radio personality, will be coming in to speak to us. We have an expert on the Federalist Papers who will be coming in. We have a lot of great people who are coming in, and it's really going well. Last week, we had an individual come in and speak to us about the debt ceiling and what that will mean. So we're getting a lot of speakers on the constitutional issues. We're trying to make it real time so that people come in and speak to us about the constitutional implications of legislation that we're taking up every week.
And members are going? You got people showing up at these?
Yeah, we do.
That's great.
We have about 30 members that came this week, which is a phenomenal number of people, and we had the staff of about another 30 members attend. So we're very encouraged with what we're seeing.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall there. I got to ask one last question here. Are you running for president, Congresswoman?
I haven't made a decision to run or not to run, but I will be in Florida this weekend, and I will be in New Hampshire and Iowa after that, and I'm really pleased with the response that we're getting in these early primary states.
All right, Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. We'll do it again soon.
Definitely.
Bye-bye.
Take care. All right, there she is, Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann from the state of Minnesota, talking about a lot of good stuff there. Not saying whether she's going to run for president, but dropping a pretty big hint there. Yeah, I'm going to be in Florida, New Hampshire,